we are awakened to certain realizations and started making fun of it, which is what often happens.
In this clip with Konstantin Kisin from the Diary of a CEO podcast, Konstantin eloquently explains what the true meaning of wokeness is. He explains its origins, how it has changed, and how it is being used and being practiced in today's world. Watch it here.
What is wokeism as far as you see it? Because the word kind of sounds like a compliment.
It was initially. It was a self-compliment initially. So wokeness came along really in around 2014. And if you are interested, we can talk about why it does around that time, because it's a very interesting thing that I actually think speaks to the moment we're in more broadly. But it was initially used by people, particularly kind of Black Lives Matter and racial activists in America, about themselves. And what they were saying is, we are awakened to certain realizations. Realizations like what they call intersectionality, which is the idea that, different racial and sexual and other groups in society are treated differently. And we're now awake to this. That's what wokeness meant. And now we are aware of these systemic forces that are disadvantaging certain groups. And now we're going to pursue activism that's designed to address, white privilege, male privilege, and all of this other stuff. But very quickly what happened is a lot of people looked at some of the ways these people were behaving and other people around them were behaving and started making fun of it, which is what often happens. And so now the word woke is kind of an insult that's being used to say these people are somewhat detached from reality and they're obsessed about trivial issues that don't actually have much bearing on reality. They're not interested in facts, they're interested in narratives and so on. But if you're asking me what woke culture really is, it's a combination of things. First and foremost, it's the promotion and celebration of victimhood. First and foremost. Then you take that victimhood and you say different groups are differently victimized. Some groups are victimized, so Black people, ethnic minorities, women. And by the way, of course, there's a kernel of truth to all these things, right? Certain groups are disadvantaged in society, or perhaps a better way of saying is, generally speaking, have worse outcomes than others. And that, we can explore why that is in more detail. But what we then do is we build a hierarchy of oppression. Some groups are more oppressed than others, which makes them better, morally superior to others. And there are some other groups that are suspect because they're doing better.
What Konstantin has just pointed out is undeniably true. The fact that some groups perform differently and have worse outcomes than other groups, but where the woke crowd goes wrong is in believing that that is purely or solely the result of discrimination and hatred. This is an obvious fallacy, and if you would like to delve deeper into the subject and get a true explanation for why groups are performing differently, I would recommend reading the works of Thomas Sowell. He is great.
This ideology kind of says the way to work out who is oppressed and who is the oppressor, because if you have the oppressed, you have to have someone who's oppressing them. We can't say, different groups do different in society for all sorts of different reasons. If someone is not doing as well as someone else, that's because they've been oppressed, right? And then you work out this hierarchy, white people are the evil at the top. You throw in some other successful minorities. For example, in the UK and in America, Asians from the Far East, Chinese, Koreans, Japanese, they do very well. Right? So they are now seen as part of the kind of more the oppressor groups. That's why in American colleges, for example, they're discriminated against in admissions because they do better than Hispanics and Blacks, right? So it's essentially a way of creating a very, very simplistic and frankly ridiculous way of looking at people, not as individuals, Steven, Konstantin, but as groups, Black, white, Russian, Jewish, whatever way you want to look at it. And it's this generalized thing. And one of the reasons it's so destructive is it's asking all the wrong questions. It's asking the question of why are people struggling, right? But it doesn't ask it from the right perspective. The real, poverty is the norm. The real question is what creates prosperity? What creates success? What creates successful outcomes for different groups? And if you just focus on, what happened to a certain group 200 years ago, you're really not going to get to the answer of how to uplift people in the present moment. So it's the elevation of victimhood. It's obsession about racial and sexual and gender dynamics. And it's the promotion of a kind of anti-Western, anti-white, anti-male ideology that I believe is very, very dangerous to actually the very great societies that we've created, which are based on the idea that, I have some issues with multiculturalism, but a multiracial society I think is a very healthy thing, provided we are not encouraged to see each other as members of separate and divided tribes. But that is exactly what this ideology does.